about to take the stage on driving corporate strategy. The moderator is Julie Sharp, our 2015 CHRO of the Year Lifetime Achievement Award winner. We have Antonio Clement from Laureate, who we just heard from with a great comment, who is the VP of Laureate University. Julie is the head of global HR for Bank of Ireland. And Antonio is the VP of Human Resources for everywhere but the Americas for Laureate University, and one of our leaders of distinction from last night, Oscar Gonzalez, who won the CHRO of the Year for Profit Human Resources Director for Azcoin Group in Spain, Latham Green, who we just heard from, Director of People and Change from Orbis, Joanne Marshall, and by the way, Latham is our 2016 CHRO of the Year for Not-for-Profit, Joanne Marshall, who is the Director of HR and OD for the University of Bradford, who was our 2015 winner. So, our 2014 winner, and Arnie Christian van der Tong, who's the SVP of HR for TomTom, who was our Lifetime Achievement Award winner last year. So they're all highly achieved and rewarded and recognized for their thought leadership, and it is my pleasure to welcome Julie Sharp and the rest of the panel to the stage.
So I'm going to kick off with a few questions today. We have, I think, I've got a timer here. It's like Mission Impossible here. 44 minutes here, so we're going to kick off. And my first question is to Anna and Antonio. The theme of this conference is about driving business strategy. And as an HR director, what role do you do personally and play in your organization's strategic understanding and execution? And what best practices have you used to incent performance and delivery of results?
To me, yeah. Okay. Well, in my organization, to tell you the truth, it's a little bit. Yesterday, when Elliot said, "Well, think about HR, about how you feel here," I felt easy. My experience dealing with the business in this company is everything but easy. Why? Because we grow by mergers and acquisitions, so we have like different kingdoms around the world, and my main goal is to influence those kings to be aligned. Why? Because we have a big king in the United States who is dictating things, but we have small kingdoms under revolution. So to move the transformation from being a multi-country organization to a global organization has been one of the challenges. So my role has been partnering with the local CEOs and management teams and trying to build a case with sense of purpose for them, right? Why I have to buy in, why I have to do it. Because they always have the P&L. They always can say, I'm making the money. Yes. So what are you giving me that I cannot do by myself? Yes. Being in a regional role is not easy. So my best practice, if you want to say, or my advice or my comment is, guys, from HR, we need to be close to the business. We have to travel, we have to visit the sites. We need to understand the business, and then we will be able to have an opinion. And for that, we have to listen a lot. So many times we go to the countries or to the operations with our lesson learned, with, I'm here to talk about my book, yes, without listening to anybody, and that's the worst thing we can do. So more than processes and procedures that, in every book we can have it, is a question of attitude.
So key messages, visibility, active listening, and what value add you can bring to the organization.
Yeah. Understanding the business.
Yeah, understanding the business and the value add. Anna?
I think for us in HR and TomTom, the most important part was to truly become one with the business. So not so much position ourselves as a great facilitator of the business or being close to the business. No, we're just as much it as finance or sales or our engineering units. So the impact of what we do and how successful we are has a direct impact on the company's ability to actually meet its strategic objectives. Without the people, it's a bit of a lost cause. Same as without customers, it's a bit of a lost cause. And that has been quite important. So our HR strategy rolls up, so we have a set strategy model that we use. I highly recommend it. Read Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Rummold. But actually, it's a very easy way aligning your strategic objectives for our department in HR with the rest of the company, and making sure that it's fully aligned and our success is their success. So it fully rolls up. For us, that's the most important part. I think what we have done in HR is to deliver on that strategy, is to make sure that we're as agile as the company is, and as agile as our software developers work in agile development methods, etc. So it's extremely important also that in HR, even though we have an agenda and objectives and we have a longer term plan, we also develop our programs and our solutions in an agile manner, so we can steer and we can adjust and we can always adjust to new realities.
And just an additional question, and not to put you on the spot, but how do you test that alignment, and therefore how do you test the agility? How do you know what success looks like?
You're putting me on the spot here, Julie. Gosh, it's 39 minutes and counting. No, so obviously we have our standard KPIs, but I always find standard KPIs in HR very difficult to measure success.
Yes.
And ultimately, it's about whether or not we collectively can sign up, X number of longer-term automotive deals, and whether we can sign more deals. So our success is business success.
Yes.
And it's not so much...
And the pace of execution.
And the pace of execution, and do we deliver on time, and what's the quality of our software process, and you can measure that in number of faults found, etc. Also, so it's more about the health and the ability of the organization to deliver on what we set out to do than HR KPIs, which are typically require so much more context than what they actually tell you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to direct the next question. I'm mixing the questions up, so hopefully I haven't put everyone on the spot. Lethem and Oscar, this is directed for you, and this is the whole piece around GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. That will go into effect across the European Union on the 25th of May 2018, and it's recruitment is already challenging enough, and then we have this regulation that is underway and has to be met by that deadline. So Lethem and Oscar, what steps in is your organisation taking to be ready, and how will this impact your talent recruitment and employee data management policies?
We have defined an audit process in order to integrate this new situation in the ISO 27001. Then the audit will tell us if we are doing it the right way or not. In January and February, we have to define, according to this analysis we are going to do, this audit, the next steps to invest, not just in technology, but in information for the inside and the outside of the company.
Okay.
As well as having worked for Orbis, I'm also a member of the National Policy Board for Public Sector People Management Association, and one of the big things that we've been pushing all of our member organizations to do is take a holistic review in terms of their systems. So that's not only looking at the technology systems, but also people and processes. And that has been really quite challenging for people. It's very time consuming. And it's important also to get a full integration both of the users of the recruitment system and process. So our employees, our customers, recruiting managers, and also potential recruits to see actually what the experience is like. And making sure that we build security into that review, which is really important. And bringing the awareness to kind of decision makers in terms of the impact of what's going to happen if you don't respond to this, because the penalties are really very steep. And trying to get them to understand that. I've kind of used an analogy a bit like a gin and tonic. That's my drink, so here's the gin, here's the tonic. You put the ice cube into the drink, and once the ice cube has melted, you can't get it back. And if there's a security leak, then it's too late after the event. So making sure that those security measures are fundamentally built into every step of that process. And people have an awareness of that. So we've spent a lot of time raising the awareness of the impact of it, what the role is of decision makers and also of recruiting managers. And also, what is it that we've got to do to make sure people are aware as a recruit coming in terms of how we're going to safeguard that data we hold.
So it's the initial consequence management of if you don't meet this deadline, and the ongoing education and awareness of this, but also the fact that having data that is real and practical and pragmatic can assist the organisation in making commercial decisions. Fact-based storyboards are much easier than emotive-based storyboards in order to have that influence and impact across the organisation.
And also making sure that we understand the impact of security up front,
Yes.
and not responding to it once there's been a problem. I mean, and there's always stories that you actually see, no matter what you do, something can happen.
Yes.
But can we therefore stand up with a real sense of honesty and integrity to say that we did everything in our power to make sure we knew what was, potentially knew what was going to happen, and put steps in place to prevent it. That risk management step is a really important piece. But it is quite shocking the number of organisations who are still struggling to actually get their head around it, and not viewing it just as an IT problem or a technology problem, but an organisational issue that needs to be wrestled with and understood and responded to.
And I think that's quite systemic.
Yeah.
That a lot of organisations are struggling with this, or they have, components of data, but not necessarily a full framework of data that's interconnected. Would that be fair? Yeah. Okay, the next question is for Joanne and Oscar, and this is to do with culture. The Bank of Ireland is, you would have seen in the media, we're just undergoing a complete sort of reset of our culture review program, enhancing what we have, maintaining certain areas and diminishing as we go through that journey of transformation. And I suppose as HR leaders, we see the best and worst of individuals. And there was a recent book on workplace culture showing that in a survey 2 years ago, 40% of workers said they had no time to be nice, and 25% they said they were rude because they observed their boss being rude. So what can HR directors do to help ensure a culture of civility and respect, and what programs would you recommend in terms of this? Joanne.
I think this is a really interesting question, and it's been going on for years. So I think there's been lots of research on this, lots of discussion on this topic. For me, it starts with yourself. So it starts with how you behave and how you're seen within the organisation. And it's about behaving how you would want to see others, and treating others how you would want to be treated yourself. But I also think there's a key part of holding people to account. So we live in a society now, and Elliot talked about it last night, the whole Harvey Weinstein piece. People are definitely more open around challenging behaviours, but it's been slow to increase that willingness to challenge, that openness to challenge. So for me, it's about holding people to account. It's about making sure that when there is poor behaviour, it is challenged, but that is challenged appropriately. We do all have bad days. We have good days and we have bad days. And it's about treating people with compassion, with care, understanding, but also where that poor behaviour is there, raising it and dealing with it appropriately and visibly to a point. So, you will find in organisations sometimes that poor behaviour is dealt with, but it's dealt with behind closed doors. And I think that's a real challenge for us in HR, how do we get that awareness that it is being challenged, and it's not being brushed under the carpet or put in a box, out to the wider organisation without breaching confidentiality, without creating another issue. So I think this is an ongoing challenge for organisations, but one that actually we've moved quite a long way in over the last 5-10 years, and I think we'll go even further in the coming years because of it being more visible and people now willing to actually stand up and say, I've been treated inappropriately, or that behaviour is poor behaviour, without fear of repercussions. But it's about your culture, so it starts from the top. So if you're seeing that good behaviour from the board, from the HR director, you have a HR director who is strong enough to challenge that poor behaviour, and willing to be stood up and be counted, which is difficult. Having been there myself, it is very difficult.
So it's accountability and transparency, leading from the top.
Yeah.
And dealing with it in an appropriate and balanced way.
Yeah, and a timely way as well.
Yes.
There's nothing worse than coming back to it 2 months later and then saying, oh, we should have done it differently.
And I think related to this, what you have mentioned, I've understood, leading by example,
Yes.
not just from HR, from the
Everyone.
top,
Everyone,
and the
Yeah.
management, and from the top down. And of course, all of us, we have a culture defined, a code of ethics, code of conduct, but we need some controls, even in compliance and corporate risks and so on. And to keep on training our management in feedback, in leading by example,
Yeah.
and supporting and helping our
Having difficult
people.
conversations. Because I think that is
Positive
definitely
and not positive feedback as well,
Yeah.
and even managing conflicts. But if we have someone who's not behaving in the right way, to include some, for example, we have, as everyone probably, grievance procedure, and even in Spain we have in the doctor, we have a doctor in the company for our employees, and we have a protocol where the employees have the privacy to explain
Speak
the
up.
situation
Yeah.
in order to be invested internally if it has happened in that way or not.
Yeah.
But of course with privacy, because otherwise we could have other kind of problems.
Yeah.
But insisting in leading by example, leadership, and being coherent with our values. We have written, and there are in all the walls in the company.
Perfect.
I think there is
Sorry.
another element to feed into that as
Absolutely.
well, which is around culture, as in different cultures, as in different countries, because actually different behaviours have different standards, depending on ethnic background, culture. And when you're working across a number of different countries, it's being aware of those and being aware of how behaviour could be acceptable in one country but unacceptable in another. And really being, and how you challenge those and how you have those difficult conversations and doing it with the human element. So not losing the piece of that we are all human beings and this can happen.
Just a brief comment. We have the same situation because in a fast-growing company with huge pressure and results, some behaviors sometimes are not appropriate. So 2 months ago, we started a plan which is basically to deploy in the whole organization. It's a 90-90 plan, so during the 90 people has been selected as a champions of positive leadership. And the positive leadership, there is an author and they have a consultancy firm, and they help us basically to identify a plan to be a positive leadership company. And in the next 90 days, 90% of our population needs to be aware of it with an action plan by department and by site. And it's basically focused on positive leadership, positive behavior, positive feedback, positive communication. So just for give you a specific tool that we are just testing.
There's a huge amount of literature out there, and I'm sure a lot of you have read it, which is around networks and who are the key influences within your workforce, and to be able to identify and target those to make them ambassadors of the messages that you want to get out as well. Okay, thank you. So
maybe if I could add
course.
to that, to what Joanna was saying, I think zero tolerance is also a prerequisite.
Yes.
You know, we could talk about it, and if somebody's showing inappropriate behavior or is just plain rude, we can sit them down and have a nice conversation with them and hope they're going to improve. But I don't know if, I'm sure many of you have seen the Netflix 96 slide deck about reinventing HR, but I think slide 72 says there's no room for brilliant jerks. And it's tempting as an organization, especially also with us, to allow people in the organization and to actually allow them to stay in the organization because we need them, because they're brilliant. And then at Netflix, it's actually, but we have no space for brilliant jerks. And so if you don't fit into how we wish to deal with each other. And if you look at other companies, because a lot of the younger companies from the West Coast are really struggling with this, and we know this company does some stuff with taxis, and they're really struggling with their company culture, but their business model is around disrupt at all costs. And actually you see that's been endemic in their company culture also, because the way people then deal with each other is also at all costs. It's all about winning. It's all about winning that project over somebody else. And those are not conditions in how to create the best kind of working environment when it comes to civility and actually proper behavior.
Yes. I think culture is a big theme at the moment, both from regulators, external stakeholders, as well as internally, and I know it's a focus for us. Okay, the next question is for Anna and Joanne, and this is to do with technology, which is always probably a bane of our lives in terms of how quickly can we become digital. And I suppose it's a critical component to all the HR programs and communication, but the products don't always align with the departmental needs, wasting millions in development costs. So what is the one question that you wished HR technology providers would ask before embarking on development of new software for HR? Joanne?
I think for me it's what does it need to do in the end? What is the end point? What is it you need to get out of it? So starting at the end and working backwards and ensuring that it talks to other systems, because I'm sure lots of organisations are in the same position where you have ended up with numerous pieces of technology that then don't necessarily talk to each other and don't gel together. So it's about, if you are, for me now, it would be if we are bringing any new technology on board, it would be, is it going to do what I need it to do at the end? And how is it going to talk and interact to the rest of the systems that we've got, so that you're not reinventing the wheel? Because I think more often than not, you can see something that looks nice, it looks glossy, you think it might do what you need it to do, but really testing that out with users. Can it do what it needs to do on the tin at the end point, and then work backwards? And then if it's the right piece of technology that will fit and work with the rest of your systems, then I think it's a goer. But I think too many times you buy bolt-ons and you buy a bit of this and a bit of that, then you end up with a mishmash of information rather than actually a cohesive, comprehensive set of data that really works for the organisation moving forward.
I think what's most important for me, and we did a technology review about 1.5 years ago, and we selected Workday as our main piece of technology, and we decided to not add anything on it. So we went live also with the talent acquisition, and we'll go live in their learning, etc. So we do not want to add to it to avoid that problem, because no matter the level of integration. And the reason for selecting Workday was because I thought they came closest to understanding who are we building this for. And I think that's the main question to answer. Are we building this for HR? Are we building it for finance? Are we building it for the candidate, or are we building it for the employee maybe? Who's the customer? Who's the end user? Because if I were to create a consumer app that needs to be available in the App Store, I know perfectly well who I'm building, what my target audience is, now what I want it to do, what kind of value it needs to bring to my user. But HR systems are always on the fence, right? Because we need easy reporting, and we need easy dashboards, and the hiring manager needs a good experience. But at the end of the day, I want the ecosystem actually to be around the employee. And then of course they have all sorts of new exciting pieces of technology with AI, etc., where technology actually continues to learn about the individual needs of the employee, especially in LMS, etc. I think that's all super exciting. But I think getting into that consumer thinking mindset will help HR technology providers catch up a little bit, because in
like
reality,
an end-to-end employee experience,
end-to-end,
like you would do similar to a customer
as you would,
experience.
so on Spotify, life is not as clunky as it is in any HR piece of technology. And Spotify costs €10 a month, 90% margin on it. Yes. So compared to consumer technology, HR technology is still 5 years behind. And 5 years in technology is a lot.
Yes.
But from a thinking point of view, try to understand who you're building it for. And if it's for the employee, then build it for the employee, and we'll get our reports anyway.
I would agree with that. I think there is a piece around how quickly it's done, but I think there's also a piece of HR is behind where the consumer technology is. But also, it's out of date as soon as you seem to put it in. It's very traditional. So we're just about to develop a staff portal, and it's taken my IT team at the university who are very technology focused, bringing people in from a lot of different external companies. 6 months to do that. As soon as it'll go live, it'll be out of date, and there'll be something else that comes on. And it's about future-proofing technology. So it's about making sure it's agile enough, it's flexible for the future and for what the future needs are of the organisation, whether it be apps, whether it be smartphones, whether it be virtual, whatever the next big thing is. Are we looking ahead far enough to make sure it's got that agility versus being fixed in a time and being out of date as soon as you've implemented it?
And I think meeting the expectations of a number of different generations that you're having to deal with. We had a breakfast this morning, and we talked about the term snowflakes, which I hadn't in my Neanderthal years had heard. And for those of you that it's a generation under the millennials from 20 years of age down to teenage years, and the premise is that no two snowflakes are alike and they're extremely fragile. And we had a very interesting discussion this morning about the implications of that, the expectations and duty of care that we have as heads of HR to manage that, but also the social implications and how do you holistically approach that. So my next question is, in particular, millennials, but I'd like to open it up to everyone as we have the time. And of course, there's a great deal of discussion about the challenges of the multi-generational workforce. We have in Bank of Ireland 5 generations, and so having to deal with those in a way that meets their expectations is extremely challenging, and I know some of my colleagues here in HR would say the same. There is a persistent theme, particularly around engaging in millennial workers and using social purpose and social impact messaging. I would actually say that it's broader than that, it's just not millennials as well. But what have you been most successful in terms of the programs at engaging millennials as well as workers in general? And for those of you, well, we're all at the breakfast this morning, it might be good to even open up a little bit of that discussion as we have the time as well.
I think I'll kick this off. I think I'm to blame for starting the snowflake conversation this morning.
And this is directed at Anna and Antonio as well, please.
I think we have an unprecedented challenge before us around how flexible we are, how agile we can become to make sure we meet the needs of all the different generations. And certainly the universities, I've got staff that range from in their 80s down to 16 and new apprentices, and their needs are very, very different, and their desires and their demands are very different. The university sector is obviously playing to what do our students want? How do we ensure we're fit for purpose? How do we ensure we've got the right technology and we're providing things how they would want them? And when we're talking to students and when we're talking to the new snowflake generation, and I don't want to label people because I don't think that helps, but for ease, the 20 to 22, they're 13-year-olds, their expectations of what they want are very, very different to those of maybe people who are in their middle careers. And I think that is a massive challenge for us around how we are flexible, how we are agile, how we can adapt our offer, not only as what the offer for the customer is, but our offer to our own staff to ensure we can retain them, that we can support their own development. And that, for me, is becoming more and more bespoke, so one size doesn't fit all for each generation. It needs to be individual to the person. You come across, and you can't generalise that all millennials don't want to be directors, or all millennials want to be completely embossed in social media. You can't generalise like that, so it's got to be bespoke and it's got to be very individual, the offer across. And I think that is something that I think we're all probably going to grapple more and more with over the coming years. And also, we've got reducing talent pools. So if you look at certainly the number of 18-year-olds within the UK, that has been reducing slowly over a number of years. Now we've got another bit of a high coming in the next few years, but then it dips again. So we've got less and less of a talent pool actually coming into the workforce. So how do we create what we've got? How do we ensure they've got the skills for the future, but that we do it in such a way that it's bespoke to them and it meets the needs of the organisation?
Antonio.
Yeah, listening to Joanne, I mean, for me it's a challenge also because in university business, millennials or young generations are two things very important, part of the workforce, but most important, our customers, right? So what we did was to run a deep plan of focus groups and sessions with millennials to understand a little bit more what are they expecting from a university and what are they expecting for a workplace, right? And the conclusion was that, you know, they are very different to what we were used to manage until that time. First thing, they like to, or they want to work with a purpose. So they're not just here to get money. For that reason, we need to have an appealing mission. If you look at Laureate mission, that's why I joined also the company, basically says that, you know, we are here to improve the world through our students, right? Providing them the tools necessary to improve the society. That's a powerful mission, right? But then we need to walk the talk and lead by example. So we put together a series of actions to demonstrate to our employees that we really believe and are committed with that mission. Then we create, you know, values and movement. We got certified as a B corporation, B Lab corporation, which means that we are highly committed with social responsibility. In each of the management meetings that we have, there is one morning devoted to social work in different, you know, communities or schools. So it's part of our day-to-day life. That's one thing, purpose. The second thing is they love flexibility. Flexibility means they don't understand a physical workspace. They understand a virtual workspace. They are used to connect with each other. They are used to do many, many things at the same time, always with a computer, with a handheld, with a mobile phone, because for them, if they can do it with a mobile phone, they're not going to use a PC. They're not going to use a laptop because it's too big for them. So what we do is to adapt our technology to the teenagers or millennials' needs in terms of the university tools that we are using and also the tools that we offer to our people in the company. The third one is that they want to be involved. They want to make their own decisions. And they are team workers by nature, right? Not physical team workers, but they love to network with everybody. So we start creating those virtual work sessions with people from different countries, from different departments. So at the end, they feel part of something bigger than just a job content, right? And the last thing that probably I can say is that you need to represent your customers in your workforce. So we start hiring people from millennials to different positions, basically to marketing, sales, and product development. So we basically were ensuring that our products were aligned with the needs of our clients. And that's it. Basically, I mean, it's an ongoing journey. We are not finished, but at least we are trying to understand what they're talking about and be aligned with them, because without them, we don't have a business.
Anna.
Well, at TomTom, we have about 62% of our workforce is millennial. And I always struggle with that, not so much with the fact that we have 62% millennial, but I cannot read a Deloitte report and then say, oh, actually, out of my workforce, this means that 65% of that population thinks that their direct line manager is holding them back in their personal development. Because when I read that stat, I think, well, actually, that means that 35% believes that their manager encourages their personal development. Yes. And who am I talking to, right? Yes. Is it that one person or is it that 2 to 3? So what we said was really important. We need to really understand our workforce. We actually understand patterns of their need patterns, how they want to develop, what's important in their relationship with their line manager, if they have one, what do they value when it comes to teamwork. So we've done a lot of online surveying, quite extensive surveying of our existing population, because it's such a diverse organization. We have 98 nationalities in TomTom. We're in 40 different countries, many continents, many offices, and many different types of jobs. So I don't believe for a second that, with that diverse workforce, I can say, well, and 65% feels that their direct line manager is holding them back in their personal development. So truly understanding the workforce and what people individually need was for us most important part of our strategy, actually. And then, you turn that around, trying to facilitate that, try to facilitate as much as possible what it is that they need, regardless, irrespective of their generation and their location and what they want.
And how do you manage that? Because that's philosophically absolutely correct, but from a capability and a capacity perspective, when you're spread the way you are,
It's challenging.
how do you know? Yeah.
So we had, it's also one of the reasons why we needed to change technology, because we need to have agile technology that allows us to have different type of work process depending on individuals or worker groups, smaller teams, as say our customer care team in India would have different rules applied than the content team in India. So we needed to have agile technology, but mostly we need to reach out to all those employees through leaders. So we have actually given up on communicating directly with our employees. We only go through leadership. So our one channel to all 5,000 employees is through managers or scrum masters or product owners, people who have direct impact over others, and try to influence it. But also we try to give them as much autonomy when it comes to creating an environment where they can actually give those employees
treating them like
what
adults.
they need. Yeah, treating them like, surprise, surprise, adults, for the adults that they are, obviously. That's very important. I think most successful with us and most engaging with millennials and everyone really is to start telling those stories. So we've been very successful internally, but also externally with storytelling. We like to think that our company culture, which like every company culture is unique, but for us, it really feels as if it's made up of 5,000 individual stories coming together. So we have it, make it your story kind of program, and it's really zooming in on what is somebody's individual impact, why they're here at work,
and it's
what
very
drives
emotive,
them.
isn't it?
It's very
Storytelling
emotive.
is an art in itself, but to be able to bring that to life for each individual, and they have their own stories, is a very powerful image and a great employee value proposition. Leithan, do you have anything to add?
An important thing that I think that we've done over recent years is the apprenticeship scheme. And certainly in public service, that has been a huge boost in terms of bringing in that new talent and creating a talent pool. Sadly, however, the government had been fiddling around with the regulations in the UK and implemented something called the apprenticeship levy, which is having a hugely devastating impact on the way that we can easily go about recruiting and bringing people in. For example, the age profile in public service is very different from TomTom, where it's probably flip of that. Our average age is something like 47. So we can't rely upon an older workforce forever. We have got to bring through that new talent into those organizations, especially if you want to kind of attract top talent. And a research that we did recently, we were asking school leavers what was their perception of public service, local authority, central government. And they kind of viewed it as cake-eating cardigan wearers with who talk about television and not aware of the fact that we've got over 100 plus different professional types dealing with billions of pounds worth of spend and really exciting career opportunities. And the apprenticeship scheme was providing us with that opportunity. This time last year, we had in the Southeast Jobs Portal 200 out of 1,500 jobs being advertised as apprenticeships. This year, when I took a look on the jobs portal, this was in the Northeast. Out of 1,400 jobs, there was one apprenticeship. And that has been driven purely by the apprenticeship levy. It really is quite a travesty in the way that this has been brought about. Very sad in terms of thinking through the kind of the impact and potential of changing rules and regulations. And that's driven by government without thinking through about the impact on business. So that is something that we're currently working with quite proactively to try and make that easier, both public and private sector, because it's the impact is felt right across the piece. And it's really sad because it was a genuine different opportunity for those younger people who didn't want to go through the university channel to come in to get really good and interesting kind of development in business.
Yes. Oscar.
We can attract millennials, talent, but I think there is another point regarding to the employer brand. We can invest in marketing, but our ambassadors, our employees will tell the truth, especially with the technology, with the network we have nowadays. Then if we are growing, or if we are creating a company with a storytelling or with a brand, but at the fact it's not coherent with the reality, we won't be able to attract or retain. Then it's important to work within our workforce, with our talent, in order to have this employer brand from our employees, who will be not just speaking in their, with their family, friends, but in LinkedIn or in wherever. And then it will be possible or not to attract those young people.
Yes.
And in our case, we have an average of 46 years old. But our challenge is, in the company, is to build bridges of know-how. Know-how of the technology in our company, current know-how, but to create the next step. Those bridges from the know-how, the current know-how, and with the next generation, for create a future for the company.
And I suppose as every organisation is experiencing change and change is continuing, the organisation needs to transform. There's a huge emphasis, and this is just a personal view, on millennials. But in order to evoke change, we need other generations as well. And you know, I do get the impression sometimes that even our older, more experienced generations may in some ways feel displaced by the focus on millennials, whereas when you're creating a diverse and inclusive culture, you require that thought leadership, you require the courage, you require the intellectual capital and experience from both the older generations and the new ways of thinking of the younger generations in a holistic way to have that ecosystem of sustainable change. So it's how we manage that balance and value each of those generations for what they bring to the organisation, isn't it? Because I do think sometimes there is a theme, and it will now be the snowflake theme, it appears, which will be something else. Now we have 3 minutes. I'm going to throw out one question and see if we can do it in that time frame. And this is, I'll open it up as well as our last question. Everyone here on the stage has been honoured, and congratulations for their programming around workforce issues. And a key component of driving behaviour is recognition, but studies show that many managers are just bad at social recognition. So how do you ensure that managers in your organisation can provide recognition for outstanding associate behaviours in an authentic and effective way? And we've spoken about authenticity a great deal, isn't it? And the fact that you will be called out as an organisation if you put out a brand, and that the actual experience internally is not there because it will come up on social media immediately, or through Glassdoor or Twitter or Snapchat and all these other medium that clearly what you're saying is actually not the experience internally.
Recognition, in our case, we invest every year, insisting in, of course, training, but is don't forget the feedback. You have to say well done to your team, to engage the team. For example, in R&D, we have even created like a contest in order to analyze if they have done right or not the production of new products or services, technological. And at the end of the year, who has done the best performance individually as leader in a project, they have even a dinner with his or wife or her husband. Things like that, or recognition in our case for people who has been working for 25 years with us in an event, or even when someone has been retired in the company, to be with the CEO, to have a recognition with a statue for something that he or she feels so proud that he has or she has been participating or doing during his or her career. And according to the feedback and recognition for the leaders, we try to be close, not just to the management and who does the recognition, but close to the employees as well, in order to listen.
Yes,
listen more
very
than
important. Active listening, yes. Anyone else?
We have it's a very simple thing, but it seems to have had a really disproportionate positive impact. That's called the Epic Post. So every Friday there's a posting of people. Our brand is Epic, Expertise, Passion, Innovation, Customer. And it's a nomination by your colleagues. It's usually to do with the small things which have made an epic difference for you or your customer. And so colleagues will just nominate, thank you for answering the telephone for me, for covering my call for me, and it'll be popped through into our Epic inbox, and then we just make an announcement every week. These individuals have been nominated by their colleagues for demonstrating epic behaviors, and it just generates quite a really interesting buzz and feel around the building. And people talk about it positively, which is always a good thing. We get plenty of negative flack in the work that we do in terms of back office support stuff, so this is just kind of a nice thing, and it's built a life of its own. Costs nothing, and of course in our world that's quite an important thing.
Anna, do you want to, before this thing blows up?
Yeah, it is going to blow
It's
up. We're
flashing.
looking at
I'm
this
just
timer
wondering if
here.
the bomb goes off.
That was good. We can enable, and I'm sure that all of us do that, through central programs. We have an all-star program and all-hands recognition, and people love that. And especially also depending on the culture, but if our teams in India or in Taipei get called out by our CEO during our quarterly all-hands meeting with the name and their achievement, that's, they can really very much appreciate it. But it doesn't take away the problem of clumsy managers, right? So somebody has been employed for 25 years, or in our case, 5 years, he gets recognized for it. But after 5 years, if a manager doesn't make, so we give him a watch and we give him a certificate signed by Harold and all these good things. But at the end of the day, if the manager is just clumsy, it's not going to work, right? Because it's going to drop dead right in front of that employee. Well, thank you very much. HR gave me a certificate to give you. Here you go, right? And I always bring in lots of champagne and etc. But that's mostly because I'm alcoholic. Okay. No, but you need to, and so we're trying to encourage, but really bad and clumsy managers obviously shouldn't be managers, right? So it's just coming back to the zero tolerance we were talking about earlier. So if this happens and this whole celebration and the whole recognition and drops dead right in front of the employee doorstep, that can happen. But when it's a pattern, we need to deal with it. We need to take people
and
I
think that's a very good point, because in HR we can implement, develop, launch programs, but the success of the programs are going to be business driven and owned. And there is an assumption, and it's probably an assumption that I reflect on, is that one assumes that we have the capability internally to execute against those programs. But if you have an inconsistent management capability, you're going to have inconsistent messaging going over. And I think we've done a lot of focus workshops in terms of that, and a focus is on ensuring that there is a capability uplift at management that is consistent across the board, so that messages are landing in an appropriate way.
And it can be just a simple message of, you've done well, thank you.
Yes.
And that personal message delivered not by email, not by a letter, but by face-to-face will have far more impact, and that's been proven with research, than a financial so keep it simple, say thank you, well done.
I think it's just, if I can score in the last minute, right? But I think it's a question of culture, as the rest of the team here are saying, but most important is credibility. If we do not have credibility with our people, recognition is worth nothing.
Yes.
And for that reason, recognition needs to be part of our day-to-day culture. And that's the challenge, how to change the behaviors of our managers without being very disruptive. Because we cannot, turn your to the north and then to the south, because the company suffers. But to have, the right behavior that you want to implement and have a plan to change the culture through our people.
Absolutely. Well, look, I'm conscious of the time, and I'm very conscious of
No, it's improving the time.
as a media, a moderator, I've got to stop this now. I want to thank Lethem, Joanne, Oscar, Anna, and Antonio for a fantastic job, and in particular, your thought leadership and experience today, covering a variety of topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.